For years, fans have speculated about the tension between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal. Whispers of backstage drama, bold insults, and a long-standing rivalry have floated around Hollywood. But now, Van Damme is finally speaking out, and he's not holding back. In a rare moment, he pulls no punches and calls out Seagal like never before. Join us as we look into exactly what Van Damme has said. Rivals from day one. In the late 1980s, action films were dominating theaters, and two new stars suddenly rose to the top. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal. Both actors exploded onto the scene in the exact same year, 1988, with films that introduced them as martial arts legends in the making. Van Damme made his breakthrough with Bloodsport, a film that quickly became a cult classic. It was based on the supposed true story of Frank Dux, a martial artist who competed in an underground full-contact tournament called the Kumite. The movie didn't just showcase Van Damme's athleticism, it made his high-flying kicks, impressive splits, and camera-ready presence unforgettable. Audiences were fascinated by his speed, power, and the energy he brought to the screen. In the same year, Steven Seagal made his debut with Above the Law, also known as Nico in some regions. While Van Damme was about flash and flexibility, Seagal was introduced as a serious, no-nonsense martial artist with a mysterious past. Above the Law presented Seagal as a former CIA agent turned cop, someone deeply connected to real-world intelligence operations. His fighting style was different, less about kicks and movement, and more about wrist locks, throws, and breaking bones with minimal effort. These two films put both men on the Hollywood map almost overnight. From that point on, Van Damme and Seagal became the faces of martial arts cinema in the West. But while they may have arrived at the same time, the roads they took to get there and the way they were seen by fans couldn't have been more different. The biggest difference between Van Damme and Seagal was their martial arts training. Van Damme came from a background of real competition and physical performance. He was born in Belgium and started training in Shotokan karate at a young age. Over time, he also trained in kickboxing and full-contact karate, disciplines that demand strength, discipline, and real fighting experience. Before he ever made it to Hollywood, Van Damme had already fought in amateur tournaments in Europe and won actual matches. But there was another unique aspect to Van Damme's training. He studied ballet for several years. While some mocked this at the time, it gave him something other martial artists didn't have: incredible balance, flexibility, and control over his body. This is what made his movements in films so smooth and beautiful to watch. His jumps, spins, and kicks looked almost effortless, and that made him stand out from the rest. Seagal, on the other hand, trained in Aikido, a Japanese martial art that focuses on using an opponent's energy against them. Aikido is known for its wrist locks, joint manipulations, and smooth flowing techniques. Seagal claimed to have studied Aikido in Japan, and even said he was the first Westerner to run an Aikido dojo there. He also claimed to have worked with government agencies, trained law enforcement officers, and been involved in covert operations. While Seagal's background sounded impressive, there were very few verifiable records to back up many of these claims. That didn't stop his Hollywood rise, though. The way he was marketed helped create a mystique around him. People believed he was more than just an actor. He was a real fighter with real-world experience. Whether or not that was true didn't seem to matter at the time. What mattered was the story. The key difference was that Van Damme's martial arts credentials were easy to verify, while Seagal's were mostly based on word of mouth and self-promotion. These differences in training and personality shaped the way each man appeared on screen. Jean-Claude Van Damme quickly became known for his flashy style. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a performer. His signature moves like the full split, flying kicks, and spinning heel kicks were seen in almost every film. He was full of energy, fast, and expressive. Whether he was fighting in an underground tournament or battling clones in a sci-fi film, he brought passion and physical intensity to every role. Van Damme also smiled more, moved more, and didn't mind showing vulnerability. His characters often struggled, suffered, and had to fight their way back to victory. This made him more relatable to viewers and gave his films an emotional edge. Steven Seagal was the complete opposite. His screen presence was quiet, cold, and focused. He rarely smiled, rarely showed emotion, and his characters almost never lost a fight. His movements were slower and more deliberate. Instead of bouncing around the screen like Van Damme, Seagal often stayed grounded, walking through enemies like a force of nature. His use of Aikido meant that fights usually ended with quick throws, joint locks, and powerful finishes. He didn't rely on showmanship. He relied on the image of a man who couldn't be touched. The media quickly noticed how different the two were and started comparing them. Van Damme was the explosive, athletic showman. Seagal was the calm, deadly technician. They were both martial artists, but they seemed to come from opposite worlds. Fans and reporters started asking who was better, who would win in a real fight, and who deserved the title of true martial arts movie star. The comparisons never stopped, and neither did the tension between them. Both men ruled the action genre in their own way, but as more stories came out about what was happening behind the scenes, it became clear this wasn't just a media-created rivalry. There was something real between them, something personal. Ego versus ego. By the early 1990s, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal were both well-established in Hollywood. They had fan bases, box office hits, and reputations as tough guys. But behind the scenes, something was brewing. What started as quiet competition quickly turned into something more personal. A feud began forming, and at the center of it all was ego, disrespect, and a growing sense of rivalry. The first clear signs of tension came from Steven Seagal. As his fame grew, so did his confidence. In interviews, he didn't hold back when asked about other martial arts stars. Van Damme became one of his favorite targets. Seagal openly mocked him in public, often referring to him as that ballet dancer. This comment wasn't just about Van Damme's background in ballet, it was a clear attempt to question his toughness and fighting ability. One of Seagal's most well-known insults came in the form of a quote that followed him for years. Van Damme couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. It was a harsh statement. By saying this, Seagal wasn't just poking fun. He was dismissing Van Damme's entire reputation as a real martial artist. He made it sound like Van Damme's success in films came from choreography and not real skill. And these weren't isolated comments. In several interviews throughout the late 80s and early 90s, Seagal maintained a dismissive tone whenever Van Damme's name came up. He often hinted that he didn't see Van Damme as a legitimate fighter, and he never offered any praise. These comments began to shape the public perception of a rivalry, even if Van Damme hadn't responded. What many people started to notice was that Van Damme wasn't the only one Seagal had issues with. Over time, Seagal developed a pattern of putting down other martial arts stars. He often criticized Chuck Norris, one of the most respected figures in martial arts cinema. Seagal once said that Norris was not a real fighter, even though Norris had real combat experience and had won numerous championships. Seagal also made controversial remarks about Bruce Lee and his students. He referred to Bruce Lee as just an actor, downplaying his martial arts impact. For many fans and martial artists, this was deeply disrespectful. Bruce Lee had become a global icon, not just for his movies, but for his real-life contributions to martial arts philosophy and training. Seagal's attitude didn't go unnoticed by people in the martial arts world. One of the most famous incidents involved Judo Gene LeBell, a legendary figure in the world of combat sports. LaBelle reportedly had enough of Seagal's arrogance and challenged him on the set of a film. According to multiple sources, LaBelle ended up choking Seagal unconscious after Seagal claimed no one could do it to him. While Seagal has denied the story, many in the industry believe it happened. This pattern of behavior showed that Seagal didn't just dislike Van Damme. He had a habit of disrespecting others in the martial arts and action film community. But even among these feuds, the tension with Van Damme stood out as something more personal. While Seagal was loud and aggressive in his criticism, Van Damme chose a different path. He mostly stayed quiet. In interviews, when asked about Seagal's comments, he gave short answers and avoided adding fuel to the fire. He didn't insult Seagal back or try to match his harsh tone. However, Van Damme didn't forget the slights. Over the years, he made a few subtle remarks that hinted at how he really felt. One of his most pointed responses was, "I don't remember seeing him in any tournaments." With this line, Van Damme reminded people that while he had competed and won in real martial arts events, Seagal had no such record. It was a quiet way of calling out Seagal's credibility without sounding aggressive. Van Damme's calm response earned him respect from fans who saw him as taking the high road. But that didn't mean he wasn't aware of the rivalry or the tension. Behind his polite answers, there was clearly some resentment building. As the years passed, people inside the film industry began to notice the growing distance between the two stars. Van Damme's team reportedly avoided working on projects that also involved Seagal. Even though both actors were top names in action cinema, they never appeared in the same film, and this was no accident. There were also rumors that Seagal was doing more than just making public comments. Some insiders said he was bragging in private settings, claiming that he could easily beat Van Damme in a real fight. This kind of talk only added more tension to an already strained relationship. Industry observers began to suspect that Seagal saw Van Damme not just as a rival, but as a threat. Both men were martial arts stars, but Van Damme was younger and more physically dynamic and more popular with younger audiences. Seagal's need to constantly put him down may have come from a place of insecurity, even if he never admitted it. By the mid-1990s, the rivalry was no longer just speculation. It was clear that there was real animosity between them. Fans and reporters kept asking the same question: what would happen if these two ever met face to face? And eventually, they did. And what happened next became the stuff of Hollywood legend. Fight Night, Hollywood. In the world of Hollywood action stars, egos are often as big as the explosions in their movies. But even by those standards, what happened at a party in the 1990s is still talked about today. It was a night when the long-standing tension between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal nearly came to a head, and it changed how many people saw both men, especially Seagal. The setting was glamorous, the people were famous, and the drama was real. The story begins in the early 1990s at a mansion in Miami owned by none other than Sylvester Stallone. Stallone, one of the biggest action stars of all time, was hosting a party filled with Hollywood's elite. The guest list included directors, producers, celebrities, and, of course, a bunch of major action heroes. It was a night full of testosterone, wealth, and star power. This wasn't just any Hollywood gathering. It was a place where big names met and often tried to outshine one another. Stallone's parties were known for being wild, but also competitive. The atmosphere was loud, confident, and high energy. And in the middle of that scene was Steven Seagal, doing what he often did at these events: talking. Seagal had a reputation for bragging about his martial arts skills and his supposed experiences working with intelligence agencies and law enforcement. This time, his mouth got him into serious trouble. According to multiple accounts, including from Stallone himself, Seagal started claiming again that he could easily beat Jean-Claude Van Damme in a real fight. It wasn't the first time Seagal had said something like this, but this time Van Damme was also at the party. Van Damme heard the comments, but instead of ignoring them or walking away, he decided to finally address the trash talk head-on. He walked over to Seagal in front of a group of guests. The mood shifted instantly. The music might have still been playing, but all eyes were now on these two men. According to eyewitnesses, Van Damme stayed calm but direct. He told Seagal, "Let's go outside." The message was clear. If Seagal really thought he could take Van Damme, now was the time to prove it. At first, Seagal tried to laugh it off. He made jokes, tried to change the subject, and played like it was no big deal. But Van Damme wasn't joking. He stood firm and said again, "You talk a lot. Let's see what you can do." The room went silent. Everyone watched closely. This wasn't a movie. It was two action stars in real life, and it felt like a showdown was about to happen. Faced with Van Damme's challenge, Seagal had a decision to make. And in front of that crowd, he chose not to fight. He refused to go outside. Some say he made an excuse. Others say he just stayed put and avoided the confrontation. Van Damme didn't press it right then, but the night wasn't over. Later that same evening, Seagal actually left the party. Van Damme, still upset, followed him to a second location, possibly another party or gathering that night. Once again, he confronted Seagal and asked if he was ready to back up his words. And once again, Seagal walked away. He didn't respond with action, and he didn't accept the challenge. This second refusal made an even bigger impression. It wasn't just a moment of hesitation, it looked like clear avoidance. The story spread quickly after that, and people started talking. One of the key voices to confirm the story was Sylvester Stallone himself. In later interviews, he openly spoke about the incident. Stallone said, "Seagal wanted none of it. He fled." Coming from someone as respected as Stallone, this statement carried a lot of weight. Industry insiders were stunned. The image Seagal had carefully built, that of a calm, deadly martial artist who could handle anyone, started to fall apart. The idea that he had been confronted not once but twice and walked away both times hurt his credibility. Fans began to question if Seagal was really the fighter he claimed to be. After all, Van Damme had a real fighting background with actual tournament wins. Seagal, on the other hand, had no public record of fighting in competitions. His main background was in Aikido, a defensive art that focuses on throws and redirection but is not known for full-contact sparring. The fallout continued over the years. While Seagal kept making movies, his reputation as a real tough guy took a hit that never fully recovered. For Van Damme, the story boosted his image. He was seen as someone who didn't just play a fighter on screen. He was willing to stand up for himself in real life. And he did it without yelling, without bragging, and without making a scene, just with a calm challenge. For many fans and insiders, this moment revealed who the real deal was. The quiet, confident fighter who said, "Let's go outside," was taken more seriously than the one who had been making bold claims for years. This moment became a defining story in the careers of both men. Even decades later, people still bring it up when discussing their rivalry. It wasn't just about two men and their egos. It was about what happens when talk meets reality. Van Damme breaks his silence. After the Stallone party incident, the world had seen how the long simmering tension between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal had nearly come to a head. The event spoke volumes, even without a physical altercation. What came next was just as important: Van Damme's response. But instead of firing back loudly or starting a public war of words, Van Damme took a different route. Quiet, controlled, and smart, his approach was more damaging in the long run because it was calm and honest. He didn't need to scream to be heard. He let the truth speak. Van Damme could have easily gone to the press and attacked Seagal. He had the upper hand after the party showdown. Seagal had backed down twice, But Van Damme didn't go for revenge or drama. He stayed professional. Over the years, he gave interviews, appeared on talk shows, and answered questions from journalists. But he never led a personal attack campaign against Seagal. That didn't mean he forgot. His words were always careful. He chose to take the higher road, focusing instead on themes like discipline, respect, and truth. When asked about rivalry in the action movie world, Van Damme usually answered by praising martial arts as a path to self-control and self-improvement. It was clear he believed that martial arts were not just about fighting, but about character. His restraint earned him a lot of respect. Fans and people in the film industry noticed how he handled things with dignity. Rather than lowering himself to the level of personal insults, he kept his focus on values, showing maturity and control. While Van Damme didn't name names, he did leave behind a trail of comments that many saw as aimed directly at Seagal. The context was always there, even if the target wasn't clearly stated. These interviews came across as honest, thoughtful, and often sharp in a quiet way. In one interview, Van Damme said, "Real fighters don't need to constantly assert dominance." It wasn't an aggressive statement, but it hit hard. Fans and critics immediately saw it as a direct contrast to Seagal's public image, which often included bragging about his skills, his work with law enforcement, and his supposed military ties. In another moment, Van Damme criticized people in the industry who take themselves too seriously and try to intimidate with stories. Again, he didn't mention anyone by name, but it was easy to connect the dots. Seagal had built much of his public identity on mysterious claims and outlandish stories, whether about CIA connections, street fights, or being unbeatable in combat. Van Damme was making it clear. Talking big wasn't the same as being real. He let people come to their own conclusions. There was no need to shout. His words did enough. And then there was his quiet smirk during a particular interview when the Stallone party came up. The interviewer asked about the famous night, and Van Damme smiled and simply said, "It's time for the truth." He didn't add much more, but the way he said it, paired with his expression, told the whole story. He didn't need to elaborate. Everyone knew what he meant. These kinds of comments showed how smart Van Damme was in handling the situation. He stayed calm, kept his dignity, but still made his point clear. More than anything, Van Damme let his martial arts background and work ethic speak louder than any interview ever could. He kept training. He kept performing incredible moves on screen. He kept pushing his body even as he aged to do things that younger fighters couldn't always manage. His signature splits, spinning heel kicks, and smooth techniques continued to impress audiences worldwide. While Seagal's film career started to decline in the late 90s and early 2000s, with more low-budget films and less martial arts on display, Van Damme slowly earned back the respect of fans through steady work and quiet consistency. Behind the scenes, people noticed that Van Damme still trained with real martial artists. He stayed close to the world that had given him his start. Seagal, meanwhile, often isolated himself and continued making unbelievable claims. His image suffered, while Van Damme's grew stronger. By staying silent on the worst insults and letting his actions do the talking, Van Damme became the opposite of the loud, boastful figure Seagal had become known as. That contrast made Van Damme's approach even more powerful. Even Seagal's camp began to quiet down. After the Stallone party incident and years of being publicly challenged without delivering, Seagal's bold statements faded. His interviews became less confrontational. His critics had grown louder. His defenders became harder to find. And through it all, Van Damme stayed composed. Fans admired that. He didn't go looking for a fight, but he didn't run from it either. When challenged, he stood firm. When insulted, he replied with character. When asked to pick sides, many chose Van Damme, Not because he yelled the loudest, but because he showed who he really was through discipline, action, and grace. Fighter or faker? As the rivalry between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal grew, fans, critics, and martial artists alike started asking a simple question: who could really fight? Both men built their careers on martial arts. Both played deadly characters on screen. But in the real world, only one had the kind of credentials that stood up to serious scrutiny. When people looked past the movie roles and into actual fighting experience, the differences between Van Damme and Seagal became impossible to ignore. Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't just a martial arts actor. He was a real fighter long before he ever stepped in front of a camera. Born in Belgium, he started training in Shotokan karate as a child, and eventually earned a black belt. As he grew older, Van Damme entered the world of competitive martial arts, specifically full-contact karate and kickboxing. Unlike many martial arts actors, Van Damme had real matches. His fight record has been documented and verified. He competed across Europe, winning several tournaments and titles. His blend of power, speed, and flexibility made him stand out. He wasn't just performing moves, he was applying them under pressure, against skilled opponents. One of Van Damme's strengths was that he could physically show his talent without relying on camera tricks. His spinning heel kicks, flying splits, and explosive footwork weren't just for film. They were part of his actual fighting background. That authenticity made his screen presence even more powerful. People believed in what they saw because it matched what he could really do. Fans, martial artists, and even his fellow actors respected Van Damme's background. He wasn't just an action star pretending to fight. He was the real thing, and it showed. Steven Seagal, on the other hand, built his public image around mystique. His style was calm, controlled, and powerful. And in his early films, he moved with confidence and purpose. He practiced Aikido, a Japanese martial art focused on using an opponent's momentum against them. On screen, his technique looked effective. It was smooth and often brutal, showing him flipping attackers with ease. Seagal also claimed to have a deep and mysterious background. He said he had spent many years in Japan, was the first Westerner to run an Aikido dojo there, and had trained military and CIA operatives. Over the years, he hinted at secretive missions and work with law enforcement agencies. To many fans, this added an air of danger to his image. But as time passed, people began to ask questions. Many of Seagal's claims couldn't be proven. No solid evidence ever surfaced to confirm his supposed work with the CIA or other agencies. His connection to elite training programs remained unverified. And while he did live and study in Japan, the exact details of his teaching and training there are often debated. Even his use of Aikido came under scrutiny. While Aikido is a respected martial art, it is non-competitive and has long been criticized by some fighters for being less effective in real combat situations. Aikido doesn't involve sparring or full-contact matches like kickboxing or MMA. It's more about philosophy, movement, and technique than actual fighting under pressure. Critics pointed out that Seagal never had to prove his skills in real competition. Most of Seagal's fights were choreographed for the screen. Unlike Van Damme, he didn't have a verified record of tournaments or matches. He also rarely demonstrated his skills outside of movies, leading some to question how much of it was real versus just acting. Over time, the martial arts community started to doubt his credibility. Some respected fighters, including judo legend Jean Lebel, openly challenged Seagal's behavior and background. There were rumors of confrontations, and many insiders stopped taking his claims seriously. In the end, when it came to martial arts credentials, the contrast was clear. Van Damme was a proven competitor who had earned his place through hard work and real fights. Seagal built an image based on mystery and myth, but that image began to crumble when people started asking for evidence. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.